Go live. All right, I think we are good to go. Excellent connection. Ready to rock and roll on a little bit of a... Awesome. Everything's looking swell. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another spicy episode of the Sanity stream with Lucius Coal. If you like this type of content, go down below, like, subscribe, share, and of course leave a comment if you think I deserve it. I got a special guest with on me tonight. I am super stoked. This is Reverend Brandon Warr. That's right, he is a reverend of a Lutheran church, and I'm really excited to have the first guest here on the Sandy stream. So if you want to just do a nice little quick intro and just let the people know what you do, who you are, and we'll get things started.
Well, greetings everyone. Reverend Brandon Warr. Cheers to our communist overlords who are watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I pastor St. Patrick Lutheran Church in Chipley, Florida. And I moonlight on YouTube as well, kind of ranting and raving about theology, the world, politics, kind of a little bit of all that stuff, just from a conservative Christian confessional Lutheran perspective. And
things good on this end. Okay, reconnection successful. Not sure. Okay, we're back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus, I'm so sorry. Let's make sure this is good.
They're already on to us, man. They're already trying to boot us off YouTube.
Yep, they're already attacking us. Jesus, oh my God, I apologize for that. With that said, let's get into it. All right, so I'm starting to think at this point that we really are under an arbitrage of whether you want to call it the deep state or just the government in general. There seems to be an allocated attack towards attacking people with conservative views. And I really don't know where we go from here. It seems like, people are starting to wake up that the media has been lying to them for a very long time. This is 78 plus million people strong. They're using very highlighted terms such as domestic terrorists and using it on just plain old conservatives, not people that are violent, not people that are coming out of left field with crazy ideas about certain types of nationalism, if you know what I'm talking about. But it seems to be this large brush that is being brought out across the entire conservative movement. And it's very scary about what we're seeing here. What are your thoughts on the current big tech censorship that's going across the entire web right now?
Well, if anyone is familiar with any sort of Christian history, you know that in the first century, Roman Emperor Nero decided that he was going to start some fake news of his own, and he was going to use a tragedy, which was the fire that was set in Rome, to his advantage. And just like an Obama appointee once said, never let a good tragedy go to waste, right? So he used it as an opportunity to start persecuting Christians, labeled them domestic terrorists because he said that Christians started the fire. Now, there's no proof that Christians started the fire. Some historians say that Nero himself may have started the fire. So for anyone who knows their church history, the Christian churches dealt with fake news and false claims of insurrection for as long as all the way back to the first century AD. So this is kind of, for Christians at least, or at least Christians that know their history, this isn't new. We've been dealing with this for a while. And me being a Lutheran, Lutherans were also labeled insurrectionists back in the day because we had the audacity to say that the Pope was probably wrong on some stuff. Imagine the shock, right? So I think that for Christians, if those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, we know that cliche. It's become a cliche, but I think 2021 and the glorious reign of Beijing Biden is going to show us that the cliche is not so cliche anymore. And we see that now, especially with, Parler being taken offline. They told us, hey, you don't like Twitter, make your own. Well, we did. And it was taken off the internet. You make your own servers, make your own web hosting. You know what? Just make your own internet. Just go to you go to that part, and so we're unfortunately conservatives, I think, are going to be allocated to these strange corners of the internet, or even of life in general. I mean, the idea that you can't socially be accepted, and you have to be labeled a domestic terrorist. I mean, this is it's absolutely insane. It's something that the Christian church has dealt with before. So hopefully we have enough Christians that will uh, yeah, I hate to be too spicy right up front, but a lot of Christians need to get their head out of their ass and actually look at their own history and realize that, we've got to actually kind of dig our heels in the ground and stand up for what we have believed for 2,000 years. And that goes directly in point with what we're seeing in America today. I mean, the idea that we would have any of these freedoms go away is something that you wouldn't have even thought about 10, 15 years ago. At
Right.
least the popular conscience wouldn't have thought. But we're starting to see it. We're starting to see it happen.
Mhm.
And I think that if we give in even a little bit, it's going to well, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, another cliche, right? But
Yeah.
we're starting to see it. The cliches are going to come to life.
Yeah, I mean, people are finally pushing back. It's really good, and you're right. I mean, just like you said, and it's true. People need to get their head out of their ass. That includes the church. That includes Christians, non-believers, and believers alike. People need to understand that we are currently being attacked by a huge monstrosity that has become the governance of the United States of America. I mean, if you take a look overseas, what's going on right now, you don't think that the same exact actions that are happening to foreign governments right now in terms of our CIA, NSA, FBI, Pentagon, basically going in there and basically able to overthrow governments at a whim. Think about it for a moment. If we actually had that insider attack and they actually turned their vitriol onto the American people, it's really sad. In terms of Lutherans, of course, the prestigious story of Martin Luther going out there with the 95 Thesis, putting it on the I believe it was a castle. Yeah, it was a door of a castle. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. And this thesis was against pushing
It
back
was
against the Catholic Church. And where is this fight? Where is this level of protest, if you will, from the Christian right? And when are people going to start galvanizing and start using not violence, but just speaking up? There just seems to be too many sheep and not enough shepherds.
Yeah, I think that this is something that unfortunately the church in the 20th century has had kind of let slip through their fingers. We allowed a lot of postmodernism. We allowed a lot of stuff into the church that ultimately was the downfall of Christians and understanding. I mean, the whole rise of neo evangelicalism, and for anyone who is interested in things like that and calling out things like that in the church, that's part of what I do on my channel, is talking about the philosophy that unfortunately neo evangelicalism and a lot of the spurious movements within the culture has kind of infiltrated and taken root in the church. And again, this is something that if anyone knows Christian history, there's always been um, those who come among us, but they're not really of us. So that's going back to scripture. And the Apostle John's first epistle, he talks about those who go out from among us because they were not truly of us. So the church, unfortunately, has been coddled for the past, I would say, at least 100 years. And I think that goes to why we're seeing so many in the church kind of give in to a lot of things. You look at the COVID crisis, and you see churches that are just absolutely willing and without question to give up the preaching of the word, give up the sacraments, give up what makes the church in order to appease these situations. And before anyone takes me out of context or anyone puts words in my mouth, I'm in no way saying that the COVID stuff does not need to, there doesn't need to be precaution. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Then there's many churches that have put precautions in without um, demeaning their faith, without, compromising anything. But there was a church that the pastor was doing what he should have been doing, at least in a lot of people's eyes. He was making sure everyone was social distance, people had masks on, and they still, a bunch of, tattletales decided to call the police and during the service round them up. I mean, this was in a Lutheran church. And for the crime, the absolute crime of making sure he had precautions in, but still wanting to gather for word and sacrament, still wanting to gather and practice their First Amendment right to the freedom to assemble and the freedom of religion. So this is, I did a stream not too long ago on my YouTube channel, right after the DC protests happened, and I asked people, Christians specifically, are you going to be ready when there's a guy standing, a government official standing at your church with a tablet marking your name down, because you might lose income, you might get taxed because you're risking the safety of the public by going and practicing your duty to God. And
Right.
that's something that people need to be, I think Christians need to not be so comfortable anymore. And
Yeah.
that's gonna come.
This is a big wake up. I mean, B. Hayes says it himself, no slave is greater than the master. If they persecuted Christ, they will also persecute us. I mean, Christ is the ultimate in terms of who has been persecuted. He literally died on a cross. If you don't think that the government is not willing to do something, I don't think they're going to take it to that level. I'm hoping, but I mean, you can see that governments are clearly able to take some of the holiest and greatest of people and absolutely destroy them. So if you think you are exempt from that, um, you're just wrong. I got a bridge to sell you. Um, Speaking of cooties, and for those of you who don't know, I think we know what cooties means. Cooties all across the United States, cooties all across the world. How has cooties affected your church, the church in general? Obviously, people are taking precautions. You've probably seen, pastors in California opening up against executive orders, people in New York opening up against executive orders. And it just seems like we are dealing with basically edicts from the king, if you will. And it really, is there any way of going about this? Because it doesn't seem like we're getting any sort of guidance from the government. The government has a one size fits all approach, and it doesn't matter if you're a Christian, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Muslim, it doesn't matter if you believe in God, it doesn't matter whatsoever. The First Amendment allows you to continue to practice your faith regardless of circumstance. But the moment something like this happens, God all of a sudden, God, whatever, who cares, all this, that, and the other. And then it's ironic because a lot of these politicians claim they're Catholic or claim they're Lutheran or claim they're Protestant or claim this, claim that. But when the rubber actually meets the road, they don't care about the believers. And what can you say in terms of how cooties has affected this entire situation with the church?
Well, I mean, speaking just to start out with personal experience, I mean, my church has put in the precautions that we needed at first. Florida has not been as tyrannical, I think, as some states have been. So that's
Right.
that's actually been a blessing. And Governor DeSantis has not discouraged or dissuaded religious gatherings, so that's a good thing. And my bishop in my diocese is also extremely understanding. We obviously want to put in the proper precautions and everything else, and I think this is where you get, unfortunately, guys like Dr. Fauci saying that Americans are a little bit too individualist. Americans are a little bit too freedom loving, and they just won't do what we ask. And that's kind of where the church is, because in some sense the church does need to respect authority, and we're not insurrectionists in any way. And I don't think that the conservative movement is insurrectionist either. But then you also have, the Acts chapter 5 scenario where we must obey God rather than men. And when it comes down to it, at the beginning of the cooties stuff, I was doing 5 services on a Sunday just so we could spread out a little bit, so that we did have some precaution. Now that's kind of been less as less as time has gone on, which is a good thing. I'm a lot less tired on Sundays now,
Right.
but I think that Christians need to have this kind of idea that we're holding all of what Scripture teaches in the balance. So Romans 13 is the popular passage of, respect authority, and do what the governing bodies say, but we also have to interpret Scripture with Scripture. So Romans 13 doesn't negate Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5 doesn't negate Romans 13. Every church needs to practice their conscience and what their pastor and their bishop is going to see as appropriate in those situations. What makes it difficult is when the government tries to put that one size fits all agenda onto every single person, and then all of a sudden now I can't go and do my duty to the God that I serve, whether someone believes in God or not. The First Amendment, we freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom of religion, they're all tied in that First Amendment.
Right.
If one of those becomes watered down, or if one of those becomes threatened, then they're all going to be threatened. You can't have one without the other. So if Christians can't practice their religion, then if someone's an atheist, then their freedom of speech is in jeopardy. So we're kind of in this together in a left-handed kingdom sense. And what I mean by that is, in theological terms, you have the kingdom of the right hand, which is the church, and you have the kingdom of the left, which is the government. And sometimes they cross paths, if you will. But in the left-hand kingdom, we have something called, in this country, we have the Constitution, and those rights are God-given. They're protected rights, and rights that the government should not be, with a stroke of a pen or with the recommendations, should not be able to overturn. But we're again slowly chipping away at that.
Right.
You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, the way
It
any tyrant is.
it 100%. And you were saying, being conscious, just common sense. I mean, this has been going on for an entire year. People have been, if anything, people have been super passive, listening to the government, but we have been doing this for over an entire year, and we are not any closer to being completely free of the cooties. If anything, given everything that's going on right now, it seems like we're dealing with another spike. So you were talking earlier about bridging the gap where the left hand and the right hand path kind of meet. And speaking of left and right, how exactly are we able to reach over to the sane left? I'm talking about people that actually believe in free speech, actually believe in freedom of assembly, actually believe in the rule of law. How is it people who are conservatives or libertarians or anarchists or people on the right side of the aisle are going to be able to connect with people on the left side of the aisle and actually bridge this gap? Because at the end of the day, the people that are at the top, they are buying farmland, they are buying mansions, they are buying beach houses, they are simply looking down at us poor little plebs and saying, oh, those poor little guys. They don't even listen to their own edicts. You see it over and over and over again, whether it be Nancy Pelosi or Gavin Newsom or Wolf or Whitmer, Whitmer's husband, a great example. They rules for thee, but not for me. How is it that we're going to be able to build a contingency from people on both sides of the aisle to actually affect change in the United States? What do you think?
Well, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head in some sense, because this is not, I don't think this is so much a left or right issue, but it is a elite versus populist issue.
Right.
Ultimately, that's what it is. And, you know, the word populism or nationalism or whatever word you want to put in there has been demonized by the media. You don't have to use that word. That's fine. Don't use those words. When you're talking to, someone who is a leftist, first thing to is try to find common ground. That's a big thing. It might be difficult, it might be hard, but you know, more than likely, both of you are average people. Both of you are, in the biblical sense, your neighbors. Love your neighbor as yourself, and part of that is understanding where they're coming from. Maybe not agreeing with where they come from, but understanding that we, both of us, whether we're on the left or the right, we're kind of plebs in this situation. We
Yep.
are at the mercy of the elite in some sense. So I think getting that message over to the left, or it's the sane leftists, are
Right.
going to be, it's going to make bridging the gap a little bit easier. May not make it, it may not happen overnight. It definitely won't happen overnight. There's going to be some trial and error with this, but I don't think, doing it as a left right issue, Republican Democrat issue. I mean, Republicans and Democrats are just the same shade of the same color.
Amen.
They're just, one's got a D on it. That's it. That's the way I've always thought. And I'm not even libertarian, so
Right.
yeah, I'm actually registered constitutional, but that's a whole other story. But I think the point is, we've kind of placed ourselves in these camps where I don't think it's helpful. I think that the better way of looking at it is to say, we're citizens. It's citizens versus the elite. It's the plebs versus those at the top, in a sense. And we have to, I mean, we have to kind of look at it in that term, I think. And it's not just the rich elite, but it's the big tech elite. It's the, environmentalist elite. It is whatever person has power and is willing to be corrupted by that power and willing to corrupt, other people, or make life a little harder. Another way you could put it is those who want to be left alone, and those that will not leave them alone. Like, I think everyone can kind of deep down in their gut, they can understand that I don't want more, stuff on me than what is necessary. Life is already hard enough without the government breathing down my neck, or without the restrictions that the cooties have caused. Maybe
Right.
we disagree on a lot of things, but you know what? We're all citizens, and we don't want to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, amen. It really is. It's liberty versus tyranny. It's not conservatism versus liberalism or progressivism versus libertarianism. It's simply those who are Americans, who love freedom, who love this country, who are willing to fight for this country, who believe in the First Amendment, who believe in the rule of assembly, who believe in having your rights protected by God, whether you believe in him or not. I mean, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be able to come together with people on the left. And I use Jimmy Dore quite a bit. Obviously this is a progressive guy, maybe even a little bit socialist. I'm not even lying. But one thing that he does agree with is he's anti-war and he's pro-free speech. We can start fighting on everything else when we're able to actually walk outside without a mask on our face, when we are able to go outside and meet our family, when we are able to go outside and exercise our freedom of speech, as well as be able to practice our religion. We need to come together on these issues because they have us fighting. These elites have us fighting. They love it. They're like, oh, let's inject race into this. Oh, let's inject feminism or masculinity or whatever they want. They look to divide us, whether it be by skin color or sexual orientation or religion, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is if we united together. That is the worst possible fear from these people, because then we would have a common enemy that we could actually face together. Speaking of a common enemy, Joe Biden coming into the fold here, ladies and gentlemen. But I really wanted to get some quick thoughts from you about how you thought Trump left office. Obviously, I was completely let down with what happened on the final days of his presidency. I really felt like he did bend the knee, and I got a lot of blowback from people saying that, hey, you know what, Trump did the best that he could. And I was just looking for some fireworks at the end. In terms of everything that went down, not pardoning certain people, obviously Assange, Snowden, Ulbricht, as well as throwing his old executive order about not allowing people to lobby 5 years after leaving office. He rescinded that at the very last day of his presidency. What do you think of the end of his presidency, as well as maybe an overarching view of what you think of the Trump phenomenon?
Well, I guess to start off with, I mean, I was quite disappointed myself. I think, I went on even before Trump officially left office, I went on a rant on my YouTube channel about, conservatives not conserving anything. And, I think a lot of us hope that Trump would be the kind of monkey wrench that gets thrown into the elite class to get conservative ideas, the MAGA idea, to actually kind of take root in some way and actually have a spine. But it, Trump, I think, as he left, he didn't display the leadership that he should have. He definitely didn't display the leadership he should have, because and not to say that I don't feel a little bit sorry for him in some sense, because in some sense his back was up against the wall on a lot of things, but at the same time, so many people warned him. You had, online movements of people warning him for ever since he took office that you need to look into big tech censorship. And he kind of toyed around with it. He constantly talked about he was going to do something about 230, didn't really manifest. People were telling him a year and a half ago, hey, you got to look into voter fraud. You got to look into them possibly stealing the election, and nothing really materialized. Yeah, we got Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, but you know, if they do something, which is extremely rare to impeach a Supreme Court justice, but if they do that, or even stack the court, that's really all for nothing. So it's poor foresight on his part. It's poor leadership, and I think that the MAGA movement, or the America First movement, whatever you want to call it, should be big enough to admit that, Trump's shortcomings need to kind of wake us up and say, this movement needs to be something a little bit better than Trump. Not that Trump
Right.
didn't have obviously good things, kick started this thing going on, but really let's take it out of Trump's court and put it into, what this actually means, conserving something, what the whole idea of being a conservative, the whole idea of putting America first. I mean, me being a Lutheran, our Lutheran confessional documents are in the Book of Concord, and one of the things that Lutherans fought against in their early days was the Anabaptist movement, which is different than modern day Baptists. But the Anabaptist movement kind of rejected any sort of patriotism, any sort of, you couldn't be in the military, you couldn't hold any sort of governmental office. We actually came and said, no, that is not what Scripture teaches. That is not what the church has taught. And in our confessional documents, we actually say that it is good to pray for the nation. It is good to hold public office. It is good to be that type of patriot and want to see your country succeed.
Right.
And I think for Christians, we need to have that sort of spirit, because when John the Baptist was asked in Luke chapter 3, by Roman soldiers, what should we do? He said, be content with your wages and do your job well. That's what he said. I mean, he didn't say, oh, it's horrible that you're working for the Roman Empire, you need to stop that. No, he said, do it well. And that's what we should want for America. We should want America to succeed, because this is the land which God has given us.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this really is a separation between cultures. So, I mean, I am a firm believer that some cultures are better than others. If you look at some countries over in the Middle East, I mean, they are still fighting to this very day. We are seeing a golden era in America right now, and given all of the disaster and the catastrophe over the last year, we are still one of the greatest countries on the planet. Now, I want to be the best country on the planet. I want every single American to be free. I want everyone to be prosperous, and I want everyone to be able to freely express themselves. And we are currently under attack in that aspect, rather. I 100% agree with you. Honestly, I was shaking my head the entire time after you listing every single thing that Donald Trump could have done but didn't. And it just seems like there was a lot of bravado, and him going out like that really hurt. Really, all you have to know is look at Joe Biden and what he's doing with some of the people that Donald Trump put in power. Christopher Wray and the FBI. I can only briefly talk about what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop here on YouTube, but for those of you who don't know, there was a laptop that happened to go over to the FBI, and well, Christopher Wray sat on it for 9 months and did nothing about it. And yet Joe Biden says that he's completely content keeping Christopher Wray over at the FBI. I wonder why. With that said, let's get into Biden. So just a couple things, and maybe you can attack some of the things that he's doing right now. He's killing the XL pipeline with Canada. Canada is currently suing him right now. That's looking at about 10,000 jobs lost, possibly up to 50 or maybe even 100,000 if it includes states like Texas. The Paris Climate Accord, of course, jumping back into that, making us, holding back our potential energy. Extra troops heading over to Iraq. Israeli airstrikes over in Syria again, looking for another hot war. 300 Russian soldiers also being sent into northeastern Syria. So we could possibly be looking at Syria 2.0. Yeah, feel free to attack any of those topics.
Well, really quick, I wanted to bring to your attention, there was a video where Hunter Biden actually yesterday was caught on hot mic saying he was taking a plea deal from somewhere. I think it was a plea deal in Ukraine or something, but it was caught on a White House hot mic, and YouTube has already unlisted the video. And luckily, I caught it. I downloaded it before they could unlist it. So unless you have the link, you can't really see it. But I will forward that to you actually and show you the timestamp on it. That was interesting, and also.
Sorry to cut you off real quick.
I
did look into that, and maybe my sources are incorrect, but from what I had heard, Hunter was not actually at the White House. Apparently, he was sick. So, we'll definitely look into it. But just don't want to get hit with a stupid fact check or whatever. I'm not sure if it's 100%. So, we should look into it after.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's I also find it a little bit interesting that the White Houses or White House YouTube channels received a whole lot of dislikes in the last few days. The most popular president we've ever had has outnumbered 5-1 on the dislike ratio on every video they've put up. That is insane.
Yep. In terms of everything,
so because I'm a boomer and my mind goes a little bit off the beaten path sometimes. Repeat the original question before I went on a tangent about the channel.
No, I like it. I mean, I think we both know that in terms of Biden, there seems to be a lot of people from the left thinking that this is going to be a change presidency. Obviously, there are people that are drawing him up like Jesus. That happens to be from a socialist magazine, so I believe it was a kind of a play on it. But people are literally talking about him. People on CNN using this propaganda of the lights at the Washington Monument as if they are arms of Joe Biden hugging America. I mean, this is the type of stuff you're going to start seeing from the media at this point. It is absolute garbage. They're going to be talking about fashion and how great they are. And, oh my God, Joe Biden is the best thing since sliced bread. And, I mean, it just seems like we're going to be looking at more war. We're going to be looking at more poverty. We're going to be looking at infiltrating foreign governments over in the Middle East again, because we're going to be dependent on their oil because we're shutting down the XL pipeline. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it just seems like we're going straight back to 2016.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're resetting a lot of things. Some might even say it's pretty great that they're resetting a lot of things. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Susan, don't eat us. But at the end of the day, really just I think a lot of people want to go back to business as usual, where the elite keeps their foot on our throat, and with a stroke of a pen can get rid of 50,000 jobs, with a simple executive order. From a Christian perspective, I think that, because we are mandated by Christ to love our neighbor, I don't think anybody, whoever is on whatever side of the political spectrum, needs to be rejoicing that 50,000 people lost their jobs yesterday when the Keystone Pipeline went down. You can agree or disagree with, whether the Keystone Pipeline needs to be put in, whether climate change is a real thing. At that point, you know what? I really don't know what to tell anybody. But when 50,000 people have lost their jobs with the stroke of a pen, that's a time for mourning. It's a time for prayer. It's a time to actually stand up for our neighbor and say, out of love for our neighbor, this is wrong. It's wrong. These people are not going to be able to feed their families. They're not going to be able to, you know, contribute to their communities in the way that they see fit. It's devastating. And the fact that you have, people on the radical left, not the sane leftists, but the radical left, who claim the name of Christ, claim to be Christians, and yet they can rejoice over something like this, or rejoice over the fact that, Biden has already started to reverse some of the issues, pertaining to the sanctity of life that Trump had put in. Joe Biden wants to claim that he's this wonderful, devout Roman Catholic and everything else, but he's toying with a lot of things, and he said a lot of things that would cause the average person in the Roman Catholic Church to get excommunicated. And yet, because he is a part of the elite, because he is President Joe Biden, he's not excommunicated yet. He's the bishops and the Roman Catholic hegemony is not coming down on him. Like some priests have spoken out, and that's great. But there's a lot of them that unfortunately are just going to let it pass. But the average Roman Catholic, who would say even a little bit of what Joe Biden has said in the past, would probably not be welcomed at the altar, would probably not be communing in those churches anymore. There would be some sort of church discipline. Why don't we see it for Biden? Why don't we see it for the senators or the congressmen who claim to be these devout Christians, and yet they continue to do things that are contrary to their own faith? I mean,
Right.
this is one of those ways that the kingdom and the left hand kingdom kind of cross paths with one another.
Yeah, I mean, this used to be a joke. It used to be, and by no means am I pointing at any or all Catholics when I say this, but there used to be a joke. It says, "Hey, is the Pope Catholic?" And that used to be a joke. And I'm starting to
Yeah.
wonder, the current Pope that is in power right now, seems to be pushing a lot of things like embracing the Black Lives Matter ideology. And of course, I believe the right are kind of turning on the police state that's going on right now. And I think we're starting to understand what Black Lives Matter is doing, or at least parts of their message. But when you have the Pope actually going out there and supporting a certain reset, if you will, with other big, large corporations like MasterCard and Visa and, these giant banks and the military industrial complex. I mean, is this man actually serving Catholics at this point? I mean, we can point to Joe Biden, but the literal leader of the Catholic Church seems to be going in ways that doesn't seem to be very Christ-like itself. What are your thoughts on the current Pope?
Well, I mean, Lutherans have had that opinion for about 500 years now. So, I mean, we're kind of on board. We just to just don't trust the popes, any of them. They're all corrupt. But No, there's actually within the Roman Catholic Church, there have been some break-off groups. Sedevacatists are probably the oldest out of them. There's the SSPX and FFPS. A lot of these, names I'm throwing around and everything. These acronyms are just they're break-off groups who kind of believe that either there is no legitimate pope right now, or that the pope has gone so far away from actual Roman Catholic dogma that they don't see him as legitimate in some way. And look, uh, I'm sitting here as a Lutheran going, yeah, I tried to warn you guys. We've tried to warn you for 500 years. But no, with Pope Francis, it's become pretty evident. um, the Roman Catholic Church has actually, on paper, it has condemned Marxism and communism as being a heretical teaching, and yet we have the the current pope endorsing certain Marxist ideologies.
Right.
Yeah, blatant violation of the Seventh Commandment, "Thou shalt not steal." Yeah, he's opened the door to so many different things that even the average Roman Catholic is just beside themselves. They don't know what to do. I know a lot of Roman Catholics who grew up Roman Catholic, and they're watching this go on, and they're asking me, knowing that I'm a Lutheran minister. They're saying, yeah, I guess I'm going to become Lutheran now. I mean, that could happen. I don't, at a certain point, I think that, and this is something that ties all of this kind of together in some way. Lack of leadership. There's a unfortunate lack of leadership, and especially amongst men, in a lot of areas in this country and in the culture. We need to have strong leaders again. We need to have people that are actually willing to stand up for what is right, and to call out what is wrong, and at the very least to not budge on that. I
Right.
know that a lot of people get scared when you talk about morality, like absolute morality, but at a certain point, all of us have to come together and say, something as simple as, hey, murder is wrong, or theft is wrong, or fill in the blank, right? We
Right.
can at least stand up and be leaders in we can at least stand up for our neighbors and be leaders in that sense.
Yeah, it's I mean it's getting crazy. I mean these lockdowns and everything going on right now, we need leadership because if everyone was to stand together in solidarity, whether we're from the left or the right, and said, "You know what? Enough of this. We will do the we'll do the social distancing. We'll even have people wear masks, this, that, and the other." But people are literally dying. People are dying in droves. The suicide rate, the drug overdose, the fighting in the home, the child abuse, the spousal abuse. It is out of control right now. And the church is a great thing because it's bringing people together. And then you have the government stepping in and saying, "Hey, you know what? None of that. Only a certain amount of people in there." And I'm sure maybe you can speak to this. I mean, we are in Florida, but maybe you've talked to other pastors. Does there seem to be less people coming to church right now because of the entire crisis? Are you seeing more people moving towards the faith because of everything that's going on right now?
I think that it's a bit of a mix. It depends on where you are. So it definitely depends on. I think the atmosphere and the culture of whatever state you happen to be in. I know that there has been an increase, at least in my diocese, of um, mission churches and home visits that are popping up, because ultimately, because a lot of people are starting to discover, hey, I started to look into this Christianity stuff because everything's just kind of going to hell right now, and I wanted to get right with God, or whatever the case may be, but none of the churches around me are open. None of the churches around me want to take me in. None of the pastors won't even come out and speak to me. So what my diocese, and I'm a part of the Evangelical Lutheran Diocese of North America, what we have done is to always be open to mission churches and to people who find themselves kind of wandering and like, look, there is no good church around me, and there's nowhere that's open that I can go. Can you bring me something, even if it's just, once a month or something? And we do that. We make the trek. We do the best we can with what God has given us in that sense. I know that my diocese is, I'm extremely blessed to have the bishop that I have, to have the diocese and the brother pastors that are committed to bringing the gospel to people, even in the hardest of circumstances. Unfortunately, because like I said earlier, the church in America has been coddled for the past 100 years, and we've kind of let a lot of charlatans and uh, people who want to take advantage of the average everyday Christian into the fold. Unfortunately, there's a lot of muck and there's a lot of mire in the church. A lot of people that are wolves that are going to tuck tail and run when things get tough. But just as in the time of Israel, God has always kept 7,000 that will not bow the knee to Baal. He'll always have faithful people that will need to be ministered to. And so in this time of kind of moral crisis, crisis within the country, crisis within, people's lives, like you mentioned, the suicide rate, you know, my message to people, to the average person is, there are those who are faithful. There are those out there. And if anyone is interested, eldona.org is, you can find faithful pastors in my diocese that are willing to reach out and get you what you need, because it is your right and your duty to come to God with your burdens, because Christ carried those burdens on the cross for you. And regardless of what Caesar or Biden or any other authority figure may say, the ultimate thing is that the God who created you, and that you understand that despite all the things that you've ever done wrong, despite your sins, he still carried your sorrows, and he burdened himself with you because he cares about you. And there are faithful ministers that are willing to, despite all of this craziness, to bring that to you.
I mean, the church is incredible. I mean, just in my area, speaking from my own personal experience, I work in transport, and the amount of they are buying thousands of dollars in terms of food and helping feed the homeless, helping people that are on rough times right now, people that have lost their jobs. And of course, you have the government sitting back, everybody saying, oh my God, Joe Biden's going to go in there. He's going to get me my $2,000. And of course, what does he say? He says, we probably won't be able to put out another stimulus bill until March, meaning after the sham of an impeachment that we're going through right now, as the president or the former president and Donald Trump isn't even in office, they're going to continue on with this charade, because that's what they love to do. They love the theater of it all, the political theater, if you will. And now they're saying that stimulus isn't going to be coming till March. Additionally, when he had promised everybody $2,000, everybody free money, make it rain, the Federal Reserve goes burr, if you will, and now he's saying, well, it's going to be $1,400 because you had your $600, now you have your $1,400, now that's $2,000, right? And I think people are starting to realize, and I think there's going to be a bit of a honeymoon period here for the left. They're cheering it on. They're like, oh my God, we got our guy in there. And I think they're going to come to the realization pretty quickly, whether it be Antifa and all of a sudden all the cops who used to just leave them alone, now they're being, rounded up and stuff like that. Black Lives Matter, who has been screaming Black Lives Matter for a year, attacking small businesses and destroying cities left and right. They're not going to have a seat at the table, and now people are expecting stimulus money. And while the church is providing for the people and actually helping people up from their bootstraps, what is the government doing? Laying back on their hands and saying, hey, you know what? You guys have at it. We'll just keep having our governors produce more and more edicts and not allow you to exercise your own free will, your own free speech. And this is where we're at. I don't understand why people aren't fighting back at this point. And yeah, I mean, we need more leaders. You say it over and over and over again, and nothing speaks truer words to this day.
Absolutely. And the thing, with, because you brought up the stimulus, and obviously the church has been known for, the past 2 millennia for mercy work. And of course, there will be a lot of people that come back, well, the church have done some terrible things. And yes, that is true. Unfortunately, Christians are still sinners, and so there's going to be some bad churches out there. However, my opinion has always been that the government should not be running social programs. I think that the charities and the religious organizations and the churches should be doing it, because the church has not only a mandate to do the mercy work, but also has a better system for vetting those who would come in and say want to take advantage of that mercy work. So, I've ran food banks out of my church, and we can kind of vet, because we want to be in the community and get to know the community. And if someone happens to be, um, let's say, violating the seventh commandment in some way, thou shalt not steal, or if someone is going against what the Apostle Paul said in Scripture, look, if you're not willing to work, then you ought not eat. And of course, he doesn't mean that in such a strict sense that someone who can't work doesn't deserve to eat. No, it's someone who is wanting to steal from their neighbor should not be permitted any sort of charity. So I think the churches have a better understanding and a better system to do social work and to do mercy work and to feed the hungry, and to give people a leg up when they're down on their luck. I think that unfortunately the government has taught people to feed off of their own teat, and not kind of leave the nest of the government nest egg, if you will.
Yep.
The church at least has some mandate and some sort of apparatus to say this is a standard by which we operate our mercy work.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, this is all about pragmatism. People are out there who are suffering, who need help, who actually, they're trying to find work. They can't get work. They have children. They're not able to send their children to school. Everything seems to be down in the dumps, and nobody's out there actually helping them. They look to the government for help. Nobody helps them. And then the community seems to be breaking down. Everybody's online now, not communicating with their neighbors, not able to, properly vet people. And the government, the big giant federal bureaucracy, the wonderful, loving, caring man that he is doing absolutely nothing, as it usually does. In terms of pragmatism, what do you think is the path forward in terms of, America First, or the church, or, just moving this MAGA movement in a direction that is actually going to see real results in the world? What would be something that you would recommend to just somebody who would to say to you, hey, what can I do? What can I do to help? What would be the best way to make sure that the America First movement is able to win out in the end?
Well, I'm going to come at this from two different perspectives. Not that these two perspectives are not related. Again, talking about left-hand kingdom, the kingdom of the world, the government, and then right-handed kingdom, the kingdom of the church. So, when it comes to cultural movements and cultural ideas, I think that, again, going back to what I said before, conservatives need to conserve something. Uh, One of the first things that I would advise everyone to do is to get themselves acquainted with history, with whether it be church history, American history. Those two are the biggest things for me. But get yourself acquainted with what you're actually going to be conserving, because the worst type of person is someone who has zeal but no knowledge. That's what we see on the radical left. That's what we don't want to emulate. We want to have both zeal and knowledge, because zeal without knowledge is just someone flailing their arms around hoping to get something done. But zeal with knowledge is someone who can actually look at their particular situation, look at their particular circumstance, and say, this is how I'm going to affect change in my own life, in my own community. And once you find that, do not budge. Don't budge. Be willing to stand that ground. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of you're going to be under a really, really intense pressure cooker on some things. But you have to, number one, you got to know what you're fighting for, what your values are. Number two, you got to actually dig your heels in and say, I will not budge. I'm not going to move on this. And then the third thing would be to get out in the community and actually talk about these things with your neighbors in a way that brings that conviction to bear with them, you know. And actually, and I'm not talking about being involved in like local politics and things like that. I'm talking about, you know, like you were saying earlier, how we bridge the gap. We sit down with our, you know, leftist neighbors and we put it into perspective for them. You know, we're out, you know, no matter what they call us, we paint the picture of the elite versus the everyman. You know, we treat every one of our neighbors as the everyman, and we want them on our team. Okay. When it comes to the church, the actions with Christians is going to be, you go to church. You don't give up that place where the Lord has promised to be for you in his word and sacrament. You don't give up your duty to God, and there's going to be some comfort that you're going to have to forsake in some sense if you're going to want to keep this freedom. And that goes for everyone on the spectrum. But ultimately, comfort, if there's anything that's going to be our downfall, it's going to be comfort. Well, I'm uncomfortable discussing my convictions. I'm uncomfortable with the idea that I might, you know, I might be ostracized for going to church, or I'm uncomfortable with conservatism. I'm uncomfortable with, you know, putting my country first. You got to get out of that.
Yeah.
Comfort is not the issue. Comfort can't be the issue,
Y-
because they're because that's the first thing they're gonna come for is your comfort.
Right.
So be uncomfortable, be uncomfortable, and be willing to accept it. Be willing to accept that uncomfortable and say, you know what, I might be uncomfortable, but I'm not going to budge. These are my values. This is what I believe. This is what I'm going to do, and stand firm. That's the biggest thing. The first thing they're going to try to do is to make you compromise. We don't compromise, and as one of my favorite comic book characters said, we don't compromise, not even in the face of Armageddon.
I mean, it's kind of funny. I think a lot of people, you know, if you're to go into philosophical debates, especially in the United States, most people would do the argument of, you know, security versus freedom. And little did we know it was going to be freedom versus comfort, because people just seem to be very laissez-faire.
Right.
They don't really care anymore. Who cares about security? It's not even about security. It's just about making sure I have my nice little pacifier and blanket. Yeah, we need to get stronger. We need to stand strong. I 100% agree with you. Thought I'd just read through a couple comments here and then maybe just do an outro for you. KC773, the anti-war message is a doorway to talk with the left, I think. Do you agree with that?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think that, you know, when you bring up the fact that, you know, we've had a cool off period where President Trump did not get us involved in any wars, and there was a little bit of, I was a little nervous at the beginning. Obviously, you know, the bombing that he did, you know, over Syria, I wasn't too
Yeah,
impressed with, but you
Bolton.
know what? It settled down, and we actually haven't had a new war in 4 years, and that's something that, yeah, a lot of our neighbors don't realize. I think the anti-war stuff is going to be something, and the idea of, you know, the non-violent principle. I've talked about this, you know, even though I'm not a full-blown libertarian
Right.
in my convictions, I do appreciate the non-violent principle, and I've actually gotten a lot of my friends who are pro-choice actually to consider a pro-life position because of that principle.
Right.
Because yeah, generally we don't want to be violent. That's a good thing to do. Like, don't be violent.
Okay, so Ray Ray is saying that it's just going to be Obama part 3. James said, you can't blame Trump. It was Pence that didn't come through. I think it was kind of 50-50 there. I think he could have done more at the end there, but we're not allowed to talk about it on YouTube. So Crystal Howley, as a Catholic who supports President Trump and the traditions of our church, I always am happy to see people speak out against lies of the enemy. A nice little compliment for you. I love that. B. Hayes says, Jesus said, be soft as doves, but wise as serpents.
There you go.
Love that. And then
Yep.
Crystal Howley, last two. Crystal Howley said, God said he will spit the lukewarm out of his mouth. And B. Hayes said, if I can't buy or sell lest I have the mark, then I will come out of the world. John walked around the wilderness with sandals, loincloth, and ate locust and wild honey, praying it doesn't come too. I hope not either.
Oh yeah. Hey, hey, you know, you might have to get used to bartering, you know. Stock up on some silver, guys, you know, constitutional silver.
Yep. All right, rock and roll. Hey, Reverend, yeah, fantastic. I'm so happy that you took time out of your busy day to come in and talk with us, and you're always welcome on this podcast. You're very well knowledgeable, and you know, if there's anything you want to say towards the end here, yeah, feel free.
I want to thank you, obviously, for letting me come on the show and ramble as much as I've been rambling. And as far as my title of Reverend, I gladly take it back from posers like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, who have driven the name Reverend into they don't even deserve the name. I'm sorry. I have to go on that little rant because when I was trying to figure out what I was going to call my YouTube channel, you know, I thought, oh, Pastor Brandon Warr or something like that. But then I was like, you know, no one says Reverend unless they're talking about Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, and I want to take that back because that's a title that needs to be redeemed at some point, because I don't want Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton to just be having the exclusive monopoly on Reverend. So here I am, Reverend Brandon Warr.
Love it. Awesome. For those of you who are interested, go down and check the links below. I have a link to all of his social media accounts. I'm sure you'll highly enjoy them. Thank you for your time. And yeah, that's all she wrote, guys. If you love this type of content, my name is Lucius Coal with the Reverend here, Brandon Warr. I'll see you guys in the next one. Love ya. Peace. Coltrane. Choo-choo! Yeah. Stand up for something, guys. Listen to the Reverend.